perhaps 2 centuries ago, with a famous German philosopher, with Arthur Schopenhauer. And he said that when learning a foreign language, one should not only learn the words of the foreign language, together with the corresponding word in another language, in our native language, but that we should also learn the concepts behind these words. And you realize already at this stage that it is crucial, it is essential to differentiate between words and concepts. In German, it would be Wort und Begriff. In German, those of you who speak German, I guess some of you have German as a foreign language. In Germany, most people will not differentiate between Wort and Begriff. They use it as synonyms. But once you start thinking about communication, once you start thinking about language, as practically all philosophers in all cultures did, all of them started to differentiate or saw the necessity to differentiate between words and concepts. So, as in this quote, Schopenhauer, it's one of my favorite quotes. I always get, it's just wonderful. When learning a foreign language, we must therefore mark out in our minds several entirely new spheres of concepts. So we learn not merely words, but gain concepts and ideas. Oh, sorry. I ruined it, huh? I ruined it. So it starts, I'm sorry. So I would want you to start with this part. Accordingly, learning a language is a chief difficulty lies in getting to know every concept for which it has a word, even when our own language does not possess a word that corresponds exactly to this, as is often the case. So, and then the consequence of this is, what I said before, that when learning a foreign language, you must therefore mark out in our minds several entirely new spheres of concepts, of ideas, of notions. So we learn not merely words, but gain concepts and ideas. And then it goes on, only after we have correctly grasped all the concepts which the language to be learned expresses through separate individual words, only when we directly call to mind in the case of each word of the language exactly the concept that corresponds thereto, and do not first translate the word of the other language into a word of our own language, and then think of the concept expressed by this word, a concept that never corresponds exactly to the first one. And likewise, this whole procedure in respect to whole phrases, which consist of many words, only then have we grasped the spirit of the language to be learned. So it's not just only a matter of words, it's the concept behind these words. Okay, maybe you haven't quite quite understood the magnitude of what he said. Let's start with a simple example with bread. This philosophical idea is generally accepted as far as common language is concerned. Everybody readily agrees that the objects referred to by words such as French pain, German Brot, and Spanish pan, and English bread, that they are quite different. So according to Schopenhauer, when reading or hearing the French word, we should not translate this into German Brot, and then think of a German loaf of Schwarzbrot. Not this way. No? Rather, we should immediately and directly relate the word pain to the French concept of pain, which is rather a French baguette. And then we should think of an equivalent, culturally equivalent concept, which would be sort of Schwarzbrot, typically Schwarzbrot in German, in our own culture, and that's the case of my culture. And then only then we should look for a word in our start with the concept to a equivalent concept in the other language and culture, and then we come to a word, not like this. That's what Schopenhauer said. Strangely, however, it is a widespread notion, which can be found in many publications, and especially also in translation studies, that all this does not apply to technical terms in science and technology. There are statements like as a matter to the effect that technical terms are clearly defined, inherently precise, unambiguous, that they refer to internationally identical concepts, which result in one-to-one equivalencies that can be easily handled in technical dictionaries and even multilingual term banks, and that all this makes it much easier to translate technical text than, say, fiction or poetry. It's so easy, in fact, that any computer with a machine translation software can do it. As you may expect, I personally disagree with this. Let us start with the myth of preciseness and accuracy of terms. The usual dichotomy between special language and common language, which can be found in translation programs, in curriculum, as well as on the price sheets of translation agencies, is unrealistic. It is better to say a thing that all texts are to a lesser or higher degree technical. Our everyday life is so much influenced by special disciplines, be it food production, electrical engineering, chemical engineering, civil engineering, automotive engineering, computer technology, plastics, textile industry, to name but a few, that we just cannot avoid using technical terms. And even though every one of us is usually an expert in at least one special subject field, we are bound to use terms concerning the subject field which are outside our own expertise. So we frequently talk about things we do not really know. It is surprising that rough usage of technical terms does also occur in texts produced by experts. This happens naturally in oral discourse, when talking, speaking, more frequently than in written text. In a workshop situation, for instance, it is quite likely, and it does occur, that mechanics use the term strangling for a device which is actually a split lock washer, whose German term is federing, and which is used together with ready fasteners. So we have the German term strangling, not mentioned here, but we don't want to confuse you, for an object which is this, which looks like this, and which is properly in the term for this is federing. And in English it would be a split lock washer. And in an engineering drawing, in the assembly condition, it would look like this. So we have the federing, right? So it's here. So, in contrast to this, a real strangling, which looks like this, is a circling. It looks somewhat similar to a federing because basically it's a split ring made of spring steel, but it has an entirely different function, and it is used to secure shafts and hubs. And so it's not related to nuts and bolts. And translating strangling by circlet would be nonsense in the context of nuts and bolts. And the technical translator should know this. So this might sound like a rather academic or consideration, but it has a practical consequence. This screenshot shows a website where the text says strangling, that is circlet, while the image shows a federing. Strangling, strangling, strangling. But what is shown here, and here, and here, is not a strangling, it's a federing. I think, okay, and so what? Suppose you get a translation job by this by online supplier. This is a website translating the German website into English. And on the website, they claim here that they say Sprengfinger in stainless steel. It's no problem to translate Sprengfinger into English. It would be certainly. But then you have an image, a photograph like this, which is not a surface. It's a stapler washer. So as a translator, we would have to decide: do we translate the word, or do we translate what that shop actually sells? So it has a practical impact. Again, this is not really new. Saint Jerome, the famous Bible translator, I think he's already took this into account that the actual utterance in the text may not reflect the real intention of the text producer. And in his famous letter to Pamachius, he said, well, leave others to catch the syllables and letters, do you for your part look for this meaning. And this is a good advice, especially if we do not restrict ourselves to the meaning or meanings of an utterance as it is, but to the meaning as it was intended by the text sender. So we might have to differentiate between the semantic meaning of a word and the intent as intended by the text producer, which might be different. But this obviously means that we have to interpret the text, any text, including technical text, to find its true meaning. One might be inclined to assume that not much interpretation or hermeneutical effort is needed to translate the German word house. It's also the term. One would say it's a general language word, but it's also, in fact, it's also a term, technical term. The German house, English house. At least if you concentrate on the meaning, it's a dwelling for occupants, because you know that house has other meanings, for example, in the context of parliament, the upper house, lower house, in theater, and in astrology. So we can just concentrate on the meaning as a dwelling. So, but on second thoughts, we are aware that the German word house has a much wider meaning than English house, because the German house can refer to any kind of dwelling for occupants, including a huge block of flats. It's not a huge block of flats, but maybe there is this house. It's 15 flats in that house, but there are other flats with hundreds of flats in one block. The English word house, on the other hand, usually refers to a single family home, because this is a prototypical kind of dwelling and much more common in the United States and the United Kingdom than in Germany. In other words, the German phrase house evokes a rather vague scene involving various kinds of dwellings for people, whereas the English phrase house evokes a relatively clear picture of a single family residence. And this is, for example, reflected in one of the leading German English dictionaries, the Duden Oxford Dictionary. If you look at Einfamilienhaus, the only English equivalent we get for this is simply house. Einfamilienhaus, house. The precise terms single family home or single family residence are not given on this side in the German English side, but in the other direction, where we get those two terms are translated as Einfamilienhaus. So why we have to admit that our house equation is not so simple after all. We can argue that at least the terms Einfamilienhaus on the one hand and single family residence on the other hand are clear case of one-to-one equivalence. Because both terms designate the same concept. One might even be tempted to say identical concept. This may lead us to assume that the concept is, so to speak, a hovering like immense cloud above and between languages. And then it is the concept that serves as a tertium comparationis for translation. Of course, this would imply that the concept is detached and independent from language and culture. To realize what this is leading to. But even the most superficial observation of building construction objects in general, or of houses in particular, would reveal that there are fundamental differences. They concern the layout of front and rear garden, the frames and style of fences and of letterboxes, the overall shape of a house, the shape and height of the roofs, the internal structure, and the room layout, as shown here. In German homes, the front door practically never, this is the front door here, practically never leads directly into the living room, but always in a small space called a Diele, which the Diele separates the internal rooms from the wind and weather that might enter through the open front door. Typical American homes, on the other hand, have a front door that typically that leads from the porch directly into the living bedrooms or living area. Note that the foyer here, so here it's not closed with the door, it's just empty space, but it's not closed with the door, as the dealer always is. But they have, unlike German homes, they usually have the so-called mud room. The mud room between garage and kitchen, so one can enter through the garage, through the mud room door, what is it? From here to the laundry room. Here, here. Okay, you enter here, and then you can, from there, you can go usually to the kitchen. So you can enter the house through this side entrance without carrying dirt into the inner living room. Differences like this exist everywhere. It includes the construction method of houses, the construction materials of houses. In the United States, including Chile, most of houses or many of the houses are constructed on a timber basis, whereas practically all the houses in Germany are masonry, stone masonry. It concerns practically any detail, such as the style and stability of doors and windows and their fittings. From the terminological point of view, the terms or the words window and German fenster look like one-to-one equivalences, and one would expect there is no problem with equating and translating fenster by window. But therefore we would probably not criticize the quality of the term bank or the dictionary if it showed the term equivalent fenster window. But the properties of the actual object, fence on the one hand and window on the other hand, are radically different. The prototypical Anglo-Saxon window, which is the correct term for it, is the double-hung vertical sliding sash window. Most people just call it a sash window. They have quite complex internals. Maybe you know these windows, and you probably know that to open them, you just push the sash up. And one normally doesn't think about it, how it can that it's really possible to push it up, because the window is very heavy, the frame is heavy, and the glass pane or the panes are very heavy. So normally one would not be able to lift a window. So the fact that you can push it up like this requires a rather tricky internal mechanism with a counterbalancing system, which is not visible from the outside. It's something in the old windows you have a pulley and cord and mechanism. And so the internal construction of style, Anglo-Saxon style windows, absolutely, totally different to German windows. And this also means that English windows have fittings which do not exist on German windows, and we do not have terms for it. There are no German terms for these objects. On the other hand, German windows have a different design. So the sliding motion of sash windows prohibits the use of the kind of sophisticated weather stripping seals, weather seals, or the brown parts here, those are the rubber lids. Weather stripping found in German windows, and because the sliding motion does not allow that rubber is squeezed between the moving parts, because it would be create too much friction. Whereas if the window opens like this, you can have the rubber seal which is pressed together. So, and this special design and construction of English windows gives rise to a great degree of draftiness, that air goes through, and loss of thermal energy in Anglo-Saxon houses that is the subject of many do-it-yourself home improvement repair manuals, and this degree of draftiness and loss of thermal energy would not be acceptable in Germany, and it wouldn't be allowed to build it because it's prohibited by building codes. And in fact, the cultural specifics of windows in Germany, in the United States, in the UK, and the United States are so numerous that we devoted over the year 3 some article treaties on the terminology of windows in comparison of the two cultures. German windows, just to mention one other aspect, usually have rather tricky or sophisticated hinges which allow different ways of opening the windows. So the prototypical German window can be opened like this when the vertical hinge is activated, and the same window can also be opened like this when the horizontal hinge is operated. I don't know whether we have the same design here, but in fact, it's quite amazing that it is possible to open it like this, because it implies that it still has a hinge here, whereas if you open it like this, you see there is no hinge here, and this is a hinge here, but it's the same window. So to allow this, these two functions, the hinges are quite sophisticated, but the mechanical details are hidden from normally you can't see the details, and because they are hidden in the window frame here at the bottom and here at the other edge of the window. And this part has no counterpart in English. We have no English term for it. We can invent them, but there is no equivalent terms you won't find in any dictionary. Another aspect, I mentioned it already, are the doors. It is a standard element in Hollywood movies, especially in action movies, that you can open doors either by inserting a credit card, or by throwing yourself at the door. It depends on the kind of movies you watch, but in the country and this does really work with typical, not all, with typical American doors, or doors in the United States, but try it on a German door with your credit card, and your credit card will be broken, or your phone will be broken. Because the doors and the locks are totally different. And the German doors and the locking mechanisms are designed so that the credit card trick is not possible. I'm not sure whether it shows this, because it's rather dark. In the American doors, you see they have the door blade, and this is just rectangular here, and you can push the credit card in here, and the bolt, it has all the round edges, because it has round edges, so when you, when the person sort of moves past the doors and so smooth, you don't hurt yourself. But if the smooth edges also implies that you can sort of credit card slide over the bolt and you can push it back. The German, as you see, the German bolts have sharp edges and even sometimes are hook-shaped. I mean, if the credit card managed to get through the bolt, it would not be able to push it back. But it doesn't even reach that point where you have it. It's not visible here, but the edge of the door plate is always staggered like this. So the credit card would have to go like this. So another thing is the door handle. We could imagine a scene in a novel or in a movie where the family dog opens the door and rescues himself or the family from a burning home. Maybe night, everybody is asleep, and the dog smells smoke on fire. And he goes to the door and opens the door because the door could, and the dog would push the lever down and open the door. And this might be a very important scene in a German novel or movie. If you translate it, the German word Türgriff or Türgriff with a terminologically correct or lexically correct term door knot, it wouldn't make sense because no door can operate these knots. See? So from a terminological point of view, it's one-to-one equivalences, but if the actual object has different characteristics, and in that case you would have to think something, find a solution. It explains what the shape of the door knot. The greatest examples are in the gray scale between common language and technical terminology, and the respective words could be considered as everyday words as well as terms. Since the context of my paper presentation is terminology, let us look at the concept again in the building context, whose designations are clearly terms. The terms Fallrohr in English downpipe or rain gutter downpipe. From a terminological point of view, Fallrohr and downpipe are clear cases of one-to-one equivalence. Basically, they refer to the vertical pipe that connects, is usually visible, that guides collected stormwater from the rain gutter to the ground. And so far, the concepts are identical. However, the properties, again, the properties of the objects are not identical. In Germany, downpipes are always tubular, with a round cross-section, typically 10 centimeters. In the United States, they are practically always rectangular. In Chile, as far as I saw so far, you have both styles, the round one and the rectangular one. Whether the difference in the cross-section area, round or rectangular, is relevant in the translation job depends on the context. It could be a do-it-yourself home repair manual where it says that you can attach a fitting to the downpipe. In a German context, you could attach a fitting like an elbow, and just turn it. You slip it on, and you can turn it in any direction. With the rectangular one, you have to decide. If you want to go this way, you need another fitting. If you want to go this way or this way. This might be relevant in the translation context. Still, one could argue that the examples discussed so far relate to fairly simple things and relational concepts. And while it may be true that culture plays a bigger role in old disciplines and old concepts, and that efforts are being made worldwide towards standardization and harmonization of objects as well as concepts, one should not believe that modern or even high-tech concepts are free from the social cultural influence. Let me try to give you one example, a relatively recent example, again from the building sector. Home automation. One is inclined to think that the combined effect of globalization, omnipresence of microelectronics, and the worldwide production and usage of information technology products result in identity concepts, at least in the high-tech fields, such as automation. And in the light of all this, one will not hesitate in saying that the terms home automation and high automation are one-to-one equivalent. In fact, they are, depending on what you consider are characteristics or essential characteristics of a concept. However, the real object behind these terms are, again, radically different. The German term Heimautomation refers to a relatively recent, sophisticated, high-tech system called the European Installation Bus, EIB, which requires specially trained experts to install it. In the United States, on the other hand, home automation is something that was introduced many years ago, in fact decades ago, and it is a simple do-it-yourself approach which uses a house's existing power lines. So the sentence it was taken from a journal on housing and house modernization. In a sentence such as this one, ein Hausautomationssystem erhöht die Sicherheit und den Komfort eines Hauses erheblich, ist allerdings sehr teuer und kann nur von speziellen Fachbetrieben installiert werden, can be easily translated as the home automation system enhances the safety and comfort of your home significantly, but it is expensive and requires great experts to install it. So from a translator who knows nothing about the cultural background of terms, very easy. It takes you less than 1 minute to translate it. But this translation is misleading because it evokes the wrong theme and the wrong impression, at least for leadership in the United States. Yeah, and one cannot generalize it. It would be different in England. Unless we add a marker to clarify the context where our statement is true. In Germany, the home automation system is blah, 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 blah. Huh? Or the home automation system enhances the safety and comfort of your home significantly, but in Germany it is expensive, and so it requires trained experts to install it. A localized translation adapted to the readership in the United States market could read like this. The home automation system enhances the safety and comfort of your home significantly, and it can be installed do-it-yourself at moderate cost. This would be true in the US context, which is, as you realize, quite different to what the German text says. Culture-related differences like these are everywhere, not only in building construction. On other occasions, I have outlined different concept hierarchies in the field of welding, as shown on this slide. I'm not sure how much time we have, because this will take at least 10 minutes to explain. Maybe it depends if we go to the end. If at the end we have still some time left, we can come back to this, because this is interesting but also difficult to explain. I think we just go on at this point and see whether we have time left at the end. Let's start with a very simple example. My favorite, most simple example I have is the difference between the German hammer and the English hammer. You could say that, that's really straightforward. The only difference is we have an H in the German hammer. But. By the way, I have only seen the typical American hammer here in Chile. And now I have the selective way of seeing the world. So when I walk around in Chile, I look for rain that are down ice and for hammers. So what? How could it be a translation from? Suppose you have a text like this one. By the way, this is again taken from a do-it-yourself manual, and most of the do-it-yourself manuals that exist in German are translated from English because the do-it-yourself philosophy is much more present in the UK than in Germany. So, and one can also easily identify the translation from English by looking at the pictures. If you see this hammer, it will be translated from an English source text. So here it says finden noch eine Nails such as framing nails, such as pulling nails, blah, 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 blah. And we see what they do with this hammer. And you cannot use a German hammer. You cannot use the German hammer to pull nails because it does not have a law. So you cannot possibly write in the German translation, okay, nehmen Sie den Hammer, ziehen die Anlagen damit heraus. It's not possible. In German court, we have the problem of bent nails that we have to pull out the nail again, but then we use a different tool and we have it. And we use what we call Beißstange or Kneifstange. It's a Zimmermann hammer, of course. Those people who are professionally in a situation where they have to remove nails, they have a special tool which is called Zimmermann hammer. The Zimmermann hammer, which has a law, but it looks different. It has a law, but it looks different. And this one is not the typical German hammer. And you cannot expect that in any family toolbox they have a Zimmermann hammer. No. What everybody has, you can do the German that you ask your grandmother, Grandma, I need a hammer, she will use the hammer, and she will give you this one. So, this is when we talk about culture, effect and cultural background, it's mostly about the typical prototypes. So, this translating things from English into German creates problems because you might have to replace the images, which the client normally doesn't want to do. Say, no, don't touch the images. They will be the same. So we have to do something about the text. I could say, wenn Sie keinen Zimmermannshammer haben, if you don't have a floor-type hammer, use the bias, which is not mentioned in the text, right? So we have problems which are not visible at the surface. And this is not a very exotic example. You will find it everywhere. When I use the hammer to pull the nail, again, lots of examples of it. So it's just a simple, very simple thing, hammer and hammer. And you can imagine if you have this sort of problem with simple things such as a hammer, imagine the problem, the magnitude of problems with more complex things, like nuclear power plants at the other end of the spectrum. Let's look at this very complex example. The differences between Russian style and Western style nuclear power plants. Here, in this case, the conceptual differences between the graphite moderated Russian power plants and water moderated power plants in the West are so fundamental that an accident of the kind that occurred in Chernobyl in 1986 is physically impossible in Western style nuclear power plants. I could explain that in detail, but it would take some time, but it is entirely different design, and what happens here cannot happen in Western style power plants because the physical principle is entirely different. The design, I'm trying to cut this a bit short, but the design principles or physical principles, the differences between the Russian style graphite moderated power plants and the light water moderated Western style power plants is too difficult to explain to the general public. So in the general public, you would explain, okay, that's a nuclear power plant, and that's a nuclear power plant where all the lights are like atomic bombs and they can explode and blah, blah, blah. That's why we don't have them. That's why we don't have them. We don't want to have them. The recent example for this is the recent Fukushima accident. The nuclear accident in Japan's Fukushima reactors has led the German government to shut down several German nuclear power plants and to stop nuclear power generation in Germany over the next years completely. No real effort was made to explain to the public that the Fukushima reactors, shown here, have a design or had a design which is amazingly unsafe. One would not expect such a design in a country like Japan. I mean, if it were a third world country, would say, but okay, yeah. But not in Japan. Everybody was very surprised that it would not have been commissioned under Germany's nuclear safety regulations. Because if you look at it, what you see here, this is just a light superstructure. This is just a weather protection. Just a weather protection. And you see here we have the reactor vessel here, and then we have this, what they call in that case containment of this steel shaft here. And then here those are removable concrete slabs, because they must be removable, because in order to replace the nuclear fuel, once a year they have to drain, lift the concrete slabs off, take the lid out, take that lid out, and remove the fuel. But the only real solid barrier between the reactor vessel and the outside world are those removable concrete slabs. And this is nothing. No? If you compare this and the pictures we all know is, this is the rest of this water shield. And to everybody who thinks, oh my God, what an explosion is. It looks frightening. I mean, it is frightening, but what we see here, that's nothing, actually. It's like a tent. Whereas German reactor buildings, where the reactor buildings in Germany, here just like air raid shelters, like bunkers. Entirely, absolutely different. If you look at the cross section, you see that they have hemispherical reinforced concrete, reactor building. That's reinforced concrete, that thick. And inside, there is a gas which has a certain function. Inside, there is a complete steel sphere, which does not exist in neither in the United States nor in Japan. And the whole thing is designed to withstand earthquakes and even a direct airplane crash. Imagine an airplane crash on one of the Fukushima reactors. So, nevertheless, Germany decided, okay, we have huge problems with the Fukushima reactors, and even though all the experts who know the technology, the differences between the technologies in various countries, even the experts know it, but the general public doesn't know it, and so the general opinion was, let's get rid of these nuclear power plants. And experts know that the German nuclear power plants are definitely the most safest nuclear power plants in the world. But those are the ones that are being shut down at first. We have the French ones right across the border in the main wind direction, to all the wind from France goes on to Germany. And there's lots of nuclear power plants in France, which are only, the price is about 2/3 of the German one. And France exports many nuclear power plants into the world because they're much cheaper than the German ones. But they're not as safe. And the Germans are that one being shut down. So sometimes the concept difference are just too complicated to explain. To the hammer it's easy, but it's quite difficult. I mean, you're all academics. I mean, you understand it, but 90% of the population is not able to understand the details. Right? So, in terminology or lexicography or term bank, the terms nuclear power plant and Kernkraftwerk are one equivalence. There's no problem. But for an engineer, an expert in nuclear engineering, to frame nuclear power plants evokes a different scene, a different mental image than the framing Kernkraftwerk. And it may be the difference is major relevant in certain contexts. So, and for the average citizen, all terms with the attribute nuclear have the connotation atomic. atomic has the abbreviation bomb, atomic bomb, so everything with nuclear is associated to atomic bomb, and evoke fear. And in Germany, and now I'm talking about the connotations, in Germany, even the pure water vapor from a cooling tower is associated with radiation, and it evokes fear. Most people in Germany do not know that it is not radioactive. Most people do not know that the cooling tower as such is an ecological thing to avoid that the river water gets warmer. The power plant as such does not need the cooling tower. Nevertheless, in Germany, most people even use the shape of the cooling tower to illustrate or to evoke the notion of nuclear power. You could also say, I'm talking about nuclear power plant. Oh, yeah, nuclear power plant. Nuclear power has nothing to do with it, actually. So, one here at the end, one simple example, but not as obvious as the cooling tower. By the way, there are also cultural differences with regard to the design of cooling towers. In the United States, we have the typical cooling towers different to the ones we have in Europe. The problem is that the one-to-one equivalent of terms leads us to ignore the different words behind these words. And we can easily translate Küchenherd, the German word Küchenherd, by the English word kitchen range, or backoven with baking oven. No problem with that. But are we aware that the German Küchenherd is 60 centimeters wide, whereas the typical United States kitchen range is 76 centimeters wide? And these extra 6 inches are needed to accommodate the typical American Thanksgiving or Christmas party, which is a real German. It doesn't fit into the small German oven. And it is amazing how long it took for German kitchen manufacturers in leading famous brands such as Miele to realize that they cannot sell their German products in the United States when they just offer the typical German standard size, which is from American quality. That's tiny. So it was necessary eventually to localize these products, to offer different range for different markets. One key problem with these cultural issues is that they are rather volatile. They change over time. So what is true today may not be true tomorrow. And it is, they are very difficult to teach for example, in part of the translation curriculum. What you also ask, how can I learn these differences? It's not possible to produce a comprehensive textbook on which specifies all the cultural differences between two languages and culture involved. It's endless. It's absolutely endless. And one relatively practical approach is to embed this kind of information in bilingual dictionaries. And then the respective keyword. For example, one could in a dictionary or in something under the keyword of Küchenherd, one could add information in Germany, typically 60 centimeters wide, in the United States 76. So when you look up the words, we get the information. Caution, this may be relevant. In most cases, probably not relevant. But in some cases, it may be relevant, interesting to note that there is a difference. So far, I mentioned concepts from technical fields, but we have them everywhere. In one of the terminological theses, we initiated at our institute over the last 30 years, I initiated and supervised something like between 400 and 500 of these theses, and each one of them between 100 and 400 pages. So you get a lot of information. And each one of them includes a chapter on translation relevant cultural issues. And in one of them, the student found out that the US American honey does not necessarily meet the German standards and criteria for the German concept only. There are some honey grades in the United States which are called honey, which may not be labeled and imported as honig in German because they do not qualify as honig in Germany. This might be relevant, for example, in the translation context of the European Union when the text is concerned with import, export restrictions and tax or whatever. Yeah? So how many tons of honey have been imported from the United States to Europe in the last 10 years? So it has a dependence. So this might be relevant. In a novel, when you say, oh, we have honey, or we have honey for breakfast, it doesn't matter whether it's honey and honig, but it's exactly the same thing. You know what I mean? No? So it depends on the context. So, but nevertheless, not even honig and honey are exact equivalencies as far as the concept and object is concerned. So, according to Hans-Jörg Vermeer, the famous translation of the famous German translation scholar, communication is considered, not is, but considered successful if none of the communicating partners object. The German quote is Kommunikation gilt als Begriff, wenn keiner der beiden Kommunikationspartner protestiert. So I dare say that we recognize communication problems are just the tip of an iceberg. So what we actually realize as communication problems. Much more goes wrong in everyday communication and technical communication than we realize. So what can we learn from this? In addition to the terminologically indispensable differentiation between terms and concepts, we should be aware of the distinction between concepts and their characteristic on the one hand, and objects, the real objects, and their properties on the other hand. Because sometimes we have concepts which are really equivalent, but the actual real objects in reality, they have different characteristics. So nuclear power plant and Kernkraftwerke, the same concept basically, but the object has different characteristics. And the hammer. One should abandon the notion that terms of different languages refer to the same concept or identical concept. And one should abandon the idea that this concept serves as a term combinationis between what translation. Rather, one should see the terms combinationis on an even higher level, on a higher abstraction. So we have concepts which are causally influenced. And we should realize and acknowledge that as far as the relevance of culture is concerned, terms, technical terms, are no less influenced by culture than everyday words such as bread and honey. That's it.